I want to mention that next Thursday we have the second part of this using Microsoft Excel for analysis. So if you haven't signed up for that and want to do so, we encourage you to do that on our events page.
Love to have you. Okay, so I'm going to get started here.
Okay.
This is a basic introduction to Excel. It's not going to make you a high-powered user, but it's going to give you an idea of how Excel works. At the end of the presentation, this part of it, I will have my email address. And if you email me, I will give you a copy of the data that I used today, and also a presentation called Tips and Tricks Using Excel, which goes over a little bit of what I did today, and it gives you an idea of the best way to do a search on Google for more Excel information, and some places where you can go to get more Excel training. So what I'm going to talk about today is tell you who I am. I won't spend a lot of time on that, just a little bit. And then we'll go into Excel. I'm going to talk about the parts of the screen. It's just kind of like you need to know the parts of your car when you go in to take it for a checkup or something wrong. So if you are on a tech support page, or you're on tech support on the phone and you're having trouble with Excel, you have an idea of how you can explain what's going on. So we're going to talk also about grouping, and I'm going to show you some shortcuts. Excel is very, very big on shortcuts. I don't know about you, but I would rather do one or two keystrokes rather than 5 or 6. And then the main part of what we're going to do today is talk about calculations, because that's what Excel is really all about. We're going to talk about the sum function, which is the most used function in Excel, and several of the other calculations that are also used a lot. We're going to talk about absolute and relative, because that's very important when you're doing calculations. And I'm going to show you charting, because a lot of people are more visual than they are. They get scared when they see numbers, but when they see a picture, then they can analyze it better. And we'll talk a little bit about basic functions. And then, as I mentioned, I won't be pulling that up, but I will have a tips and tricks summary sheet for those of you who are interested. So who am I? My name is Susan Spitzberg. I've been teaching computer classes for around 30 years now. The last 10 years I've been at Rasmussen College. I'm going to have to change that, because last month they became Rasmussen University. I have to go through all my stuff and change it. But I've been teaching there. 8 of those 10 years I've been teaching online, and the other 2 I was in the classroom. I teach a class called Computer Applications sometimes. I also teach the Excel. The Excel I teach almost every semester. The computer apps, it's just every once in a while. I'm also an SME, which is a subject matter expert, which means that if one of my classes is being rewritten, I get a chance to do it. So the Excel class that we're using now, we rewrote from the ground up, and it's very interesting to see. You can tell my style of writing, when you see the examples that are in there. Besides the teaching, I worked on technical help desks for 15 years, because I did that full time, and then I taught part time. And since I've been at Rasmussen, I've been an online instructor of the quarter 2 times, and I really love what I'm doing now. So I'm semi-retired, but I'm doing what I really love best, and that's the teaching. So a copy of tonight's Excel file and the tips and tricks summary sheet are available to you. If you write down my email, it's officeguru@gmail.com. Okay, I'll give you a chance to scroll it down there. And just tell me that you were in the class tonight, and I will send you those 2 things. All right, so let's get started. Okay, and I just have some notes here to remind me to what I'm doing on the screen, because I'm doing a solo without notes in front of me. But I do want to talk about the parts of the screen, and that includes the QA toolbar. And that's up here, and I'm going to come back to it after I go over some of the other stuff. So at the top here, you have that QA toolbar, and if your file has been saved, it's going to have the name that you gave it here. Otherwise, it's just going to say something like sheet 1, sheet 2, or something on that order. Now, I do also want to tell you that I am using Excel 365, but just about everything that I'm doing here is also going to work on Excel 2019 and 2013. So if you have an older version, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Underneath that, you're going to see that we have tabs, file, home, insert, all the way down here. And each tab is divided into sections. And we'll be spending most of our time on the home tab tonight, but we will go on to the insert tab a little bit. Within each section, you have these little icons or buttons, and they relate to the name of the section. So for example, in the font section, you have what we would be doing to fonts. We could change the font, change the size. We could bold it, italicize it, underline it, and a couple of other things. And when you point to them, you'll get a little short description of what it does. And sometimes you get a keyboard shortcut. So if we wanted to make something bold, we could tell that we could hit Control B, we'd hold down the Control key, which is in the lower left-hand corner of your keyboard, and hit the letter B, and that would make things a little bit darker. Now, underneath that, you have the name box, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. The same thing with the formula bar, which is over here, which we'll talk about way later when we get into the calculations. But underneath all of this, you have the main body of where you're going to be working. And your screen is divided into columns, and columns have letter designations. So this would be called column A, column B, column C, and then when you get to column Z, it starts all over again, AA, AB, AC, and you wind up at column XFD. And I am going to tell you that you're never, ever going to run out of columns. Now, we also have rows, and the rows are designated by numbers. So you have row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, all the way. You have over 1 million rows here, which is fantastic because when the first version of Excel came out, we only had 256 rows. And so, we've come a long way since then. Now, when a column and a row intersect, we call that a cell. And the cell has an address, and the address is made up of the letter of the column and the number of the row. So here you can see that I am in cell C3, and the couple of ways that you could tell, because that name box that I mentioned earlier, that's going to show you where you are. So I could say C3, E3, D6, wherever I am, I can tell by just looking in there. I can also tell because the letter and the number are shaded. And when you point to the shades, they will change color, but they all change the same color. If you're using an earlier version of Excel, one version of Excel, when you do this, the current cell, the current column, and the current row will turn orange. And in an earlier version, they turn green. But what they've done with Excel now is they're trying to make Office so that you can use it on a tablet or a phone. And they've had to cut down on some of the coding. So now at this point, all we get is a little bit of shading. And the last way you can tell where you are is because you're going to have a big thick border around the cell. So as you see, as I move around, that big thick border moves around. And we call this the current cell, which means if I were to type right now, whatever I did would go into this cell, C5. If I was to make something bold or delete something, it would happen in cell C5 because that is the current cell. Now, underneath that, we have tabs, okay? And my tabs have been renamed. But when you first start Excel, depending on what version you have, you're either going to start, and when you start a new file, you're either going to have 1 tab or 3 tabs, depending on which version you have. And they're going to be called Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. And you can do a lot of these things to these tabs. You can rename them, like you saw here. You can delete them. You can add another one by clicking the plus button. You can move them back and forth so they're in a different order. And this allows you to have data, different kinds of data on different tabs that are not intersecting with each other. So if, for example, if you were keeping track of your budget, you could have January here, February here, March here, April here, and you could just go in and look at each one of those separate. Now, the QA toolbar, which I mentioned, is a really neat feature that a lot of people don't know about this. QA stands for quick access. And what the QA toolbar allows you to do is to take any of these buttons from here and put them up there. And you say, so, okay, well, why would I want to do that? Well, you see, I have bold up here now, but if I didn't have it up here and I was on the insert tab, I wouldn't be able to bold because all of these things go with insert and bold is on the home page. So if I want to, I can have things up here that I could use no matter where I am. And one of the ways that you can put things up here is to use this little down arrow. And you can see that anything that has a check mark is already up here. So some things come up here automatically when you just install Excel. And some things you can put up here by just clicking on them. So I could click on Quick Print, which is this one. I'm sorry, it's this one. I use this one a lot, Print Preview and Print. But this is a quick print, which would allow you to just click on it and it would print without even previewing it. And that way you wouldn't have to go to File, Print in order to do it. So one of the ways that you can put things on the quick access toolbar is to hit this down arrow. Another way is to right click one of the buttons here and say add to quick access toolbar. And as you can see, my italics is there. So you may have something up there because you're doing a special project and you want to be able to do a certain amount of things regardless of where you are. But then if you want to take it off, you just right click and say remove from quick access toolbar. So that is a wonderful feature because it really can save you a lot of time. And the interesting thing is that all Microsoft Office applications have a quick access toolbar. But when you set up the one in Excel, that is not going to set up one in Word or PowerPoint for you. Each one of them has to be set up individually, which makes a lot of sense because there's stuff in Excel that you don't have in PowerPoint and vice versa. So those are just a few of the things. There's another way to add things, but then it gets a little overwhelming. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is grouping. Now, if you're old enough to remember carbon paper, you remember that we used to put it between the sheets of paper that we would stick in a typewriter. If you remember those too, and when you type, you would get more than one copy. So you can do that with Excel too, because even though I told you, you could do January, February, March like that, there might be times where you would want to actually have something that you type go on more than one tab. So you can group the tabs and then I'll show you what happens. So I'm going to hold down the control key on my keyboard. It's in the lower left-hand corner and I'm going to click on group and I'm going to click on these. And as you can see, they turn white and the sheet that I'm on does not have the little line across the top. You can also tell if something is grouped because at the top here, it's going to tell you that it's grouped. So if you were, for instance, planning to do a budget, you would have some things that would be in every month. So you could type them here so that you wouldn't have to type them on every month. And I'm not going to type you a whole budget, but just to give you an idea. So if I could say rent, utilities, okay, transportation, I just say trans. You're going to find that I can't type and talk at the same time. So we have these three things here on, like the start of a budget. And if I go to the tab that says group, there they are. And if I go to the tab that says these, there they are. Okay. Now, after you do something like that, you might want to put rent, let's say rent is $750. And that's not going to change for your budget every month. So you would leave it there. But the rest of the things would change. So you don't want to be grouped anymore. So there's a couple of ways that you can ungroup yourself. If you have more tabs than the ones that are grouped, then you can just click in one of the tabs and it will ungroup for you. If you have grouped everything that you have, you need to right click and select ungroup sheets. And so now if I type something, it's on the group sheet, but it's not on the let's sheet and it's not on the these sheet. See, and also notice that when I put rent in A6, it came into A6 also here, and it came into A6 here also. So that is grouping, and it's a very, very handy thing if you want to have data on more than one sheet. Okay, so moving right along here, Excel is full of shortcuts. And if you want it, and as I showed you here, you can see the keyboard shortcut for bold is Control B, italicize is Control I, underline is Control U. Some of the things are very easy to just figure out on your own. You know, B for bold, italic, underline, because it's the first letter. And some of them are a little bit more difficult. But if you want, there's like 3 pages of these things. If you want to know a lot more of them, there's 2 ways you can do that. You can ask me for the tips and tricks because I put some of them in there. You can also run a Google search on keyboard shortcuts for Microsoft Office, because any keyboard shortcut that you have in Excel, if that feature is available in Word or PowerPoint, it will work on that also. So some of the shortcuts that are built in are things for days of the week and months and dates. And I'll show you a cute little trick here. In the lower right-hand corner of your, the wall of your cell, the one that you're on, the current cell, is this little square wart. And when you point to it, your mouse pointer becomes a skinny plus. As you can see here, it's a fat plus. Here it's a plus with arrows. Here it's a down arrow. So you have to really be on it. And once you're there, if you keep your finger on the left mouse button and don't take it off and just go across, look what happens. You get all of the days of the week. And once it gets to Sunday, it'll start all over again with Monday and Tuesday. And it picks up whatever case you have here. So you can see that this one is Sunday, all caps. And now it's all caps also. This will also work with dates. Now this particular date happens to be in 2014, but and it was set up that way, and then it was changed to a custom date. However, if you just type in today's date in here, it will assume that it's the year that you want. And then if you do that, you will get all of those things in January. And Excel is very smart. If you were doing something like this at the end of February and it was a leap year, it would know enough to put in February 29th, or it would know enough to just go on to March 1st and ignore February 29th because it's not the right year for that. This also works with months. Okay. And again, if it gets to December, it'll just start all over again. So whatever month you start with, it will continue from that time on. Other things that you can do is you can tell Excel to make yourself a numbered list. And the way you would do that would be to start with your first 2 numbers and select both of the cells. And the way I did that was I clicked on the first one, kept my finger on the mouse and just dragged down a little bit. And now when I use the fill handle, I make myself a list. And if maybe I once taught a place where we did this, where they were trying to, the assignment was to set up the different people in the company as to who was in charge of the coffee room for that week. And so they made a whole list to go one after another. So you have Jamie, Sue, Ron, and Bob here. And then if you do this, those 4 will repeat. So that comes in handy if you were trying to make a numbered list. You wouldn't want to just keep typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's a basic built-in series. That's what they call it. It's a series that you can have in Excel. Okay, so on this screen, I'm going to show you some different calculations and talk about why we do things the way we do them. And we're going to start by merging and centering our titles. So here you want your mouse pointer to be that big fat plus. And I'm just going to click across and select all of the cells going until I run out of data down here. So if my data went to like column K, I would select this all the way to K. And this is called a range. And a range is 2 or more cells. And if they're together, it's called a contiguous range. Try saying that 5 times. And if it's not, then it's called a non-contiguous range like this. And I would get that by holding the control key down and clicking over here. See, I could make a checkerboard if I wanted. Okay. And you wouldn't probably need a checkerboard. But what that is used for a lot is if you're making a column chart and you want two columns of data, but they're not next to each other. So you would have to do that. And I'm going to show you charts today. So they're really a lot of fun. So I'm going to just click until I get to the end of the data. And up here in the alignment section is a merge and center button. Now, I just recently got a new computer and a new monitor. And on my old monitor, I only had this little button here. I did not have the words merge and center because I had a different resolution on my screen. So if you're going to do this on your own, it's going to be in the alignment section. It's going to be to the right of this separating line here. But it'll always be somewhere in this area. So I'm going to click on merge and center. And what this does is it puts you right in the middle. And if you remember, if you're old enough to remember typewriters, we had to do the typewriter, we had to go into the middle of the page and backspace 2 for every letter. I do SUZAN space SB. And then if you had an odd number of letters, it never came out looking right anyway. So this is a lot easier to do. Not only that, but this is kind of like on a rubber band. So if you were to make these columns wider or narrower, this would just spring and be exactly in the middle again. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this one. And I'm going to click merge and center. And you have to do these separately because if you try and do these together, Excel thinks that you want to put calculations between rows 1 and rows 2. And it's going to tell you that it's going to blow away the second line of data. So you have to kind of do them at the same time. Now, once you have them there, though, you can select both of them and do whatever you want. Here, I could change the font color if I want. Okay. These two buttons are another way of doing a shortcut, which is very good. This will increase your font size just a little bigger, and this will make it just a little bit smaller. So if you don't know exactly what you want, 13, 15, you can just click. And then if you get to the point where you say, oh, that's a little too big, then you can just click on this and go back and make it whatever you want. Here, I'm going to select this, and just for grins, I'm going to change and use this. This is the fill color. So you can change the fill of the cell here. It doesn't do anything to the font. It just changes the back of the cell. So, and you have a lot of colors to choose from, because if you don't want to use what the default, you just hit the down arrow here and you have all these colors that you can choose from. So if I wanted to make this like a light blue, I could do that. Okay, so that's just a little bit of formatting here, but let's talk about calculations now. So you might think of this as a manager who has a 4 locations, and this is like a quarterly sheet. And these would probably be numbers in the 100,000s or the thousands, rather than having all the zeros there. It would say that it was that way, so that you would know that this is really 75,000, without the zeros. Now, I'm going to show you what you shouldn't do before I show you what you should do, okay? But one of the things that you have to do is when you're doing a calculation, you always have to start with the equal sign. And what that tells Excel is that what comes after that is a calculation. Because if you don't do that, then when you hit enter, you're going to get what you typed instead of getting the answer. So people who don't know anything about Excel think, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type 100 plus 75 plus 250, and then I'm going to hit enter. And if you notice, here's where the formula bar becomes important. Your formula is up here, and once you hit enter, your answer is down here. Now, you're going to see that this could be 425, whatever I do. The problem with this is if somebody comes rushing in and says, oh, I made a mistake. February was supposed to be 175 instead of 75. Every place that you had used that 75, you would have to make sure that you went in and you fixed it. Because if you didn't, you would be corrupting your data and your figures would be totally wrong. So you don't want to do that. Now, another thing that you can do, if you have just maybe two things that you have to add, even though we have 3 here, I'm going to show you the last way also. But you can start with the equal sign, and you can click on the first one, and you are responsible for the pluses here. I'm going to put the plus in from the keyboard. Then I can click on the second one. Then I click on the plus, and then I click on the third one. And what this says is, to add the contents of B6 to the contents of C6 to the contents of D6. And we're going to get the same 425, of course. Now, the thing is, if somebody comes in and says, so February was supposed to be 175, I can just type 175 over here and watch what happens to total sales when I hit enter. It automatically changes. Okay. Now I'm going to undo that because I really just wanted to show you, but at least when you do it this way, if any of your numbers change, you don't have to worry about anything farther on in the spreadsheet. Everything will readjust for you. Now there is a problem with it. It's not really a problem, but ask yourself, well, what if he had 100 columns to add? Okay. Now we're only showing you a small amount of data, three or four columns, 4 or 5 rows. But in the real world, you can have something that has 50, 60, 70 columns, 70 or 80 or 90 rows. Okay. Do you really want to do this? Sit here over here and go B5, B6 plus C6 plus D6 plus D, blah, 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 like that. And the phone rings in the middle, or you knock your coffee off the chest and bingo, you have to start over again, or you can't remember where you were, or you leave one out. So you don't want to do that. Okay. So Excel knows that. And what Excel has is a sum button here, way up in the corner. It's in the editing section. And you want to make sure that you're where you want your total, just like I was before. And I'm going to click on the sum button, and it's going to put these marching ants around this range. All right. It always goes shopping for a range, and you always want to check your range. And I'll show you why later, because sometimes the way the data is set up, it doesn't automatically get the right range. So I would look and say, okay, that's the correct range. That's what I'm adding. But look up here, and this is what's called a function. And a function is a set of one or more formulas that Excel does for you in the back so that you don't have to do it. So if you remember when I went B6 plus C6 plus D6, that's what Excel is doing here. And if you read this in English, it says add the range B6 through D6. So the colon is picking up everything between B6 and D6. Now, in this case, it's only picking up C6, but if you were out to be 100 and you did this, it would say equal sum B6 colon, whatever, I'm sorry, not 100, but if you were out to say Z, column Z, this would say B6 colon Z6, and it would pick up everything in between there. And now the other two things that you have when you are in the calculation mode is this red X and this check mark. And the X is like hitting escape. So it's like, oh, I didn't really want to do that. And your hand is on the keyboard, so on the mouse, so you could just click that and get off. The check mark is almost the same as hitting enter. And I'll show you, if I hit the check mark, I wind up in the cell that I started in. If I hit enter, it would take me down one cell, which is fine, but you don't want to use extra keystrokes if you don't have to. So now that we have the 425 in here, you look and you say, okay, well, I can go do that in here and here and here. But again, ask yourself, what if you had 100 rows? Do you really want to repeat this 100 times? And the answer is no, I don't think you do. And that goes back to that fill handle that I showed you on the shortcuts tab. So with your finger on the left mouse key, once you see that you have your skinny plus here, if you click and hold your finger down and then drag down here, you're going to get all the right answers. This is going to be B6, B7, B8, B9. Okay. So think to yourself, how is Excel so smart that it knows that that's what we want to do in all the other calculations? Well, the reason Excel is so smart is because this is what we call a relational sum here. And it's related to how far these things are from your total. So if you read that this way and say, okay, I'm taking the third to the left cell plus the second to the left plus the first to the left to get my total. And you come down here and it's the same thing. Oh, third, second, first. Third, second, first. And if you were down to row 100, it would still be third, second, first. So These are two shortcuts that allow you to put in your information very, very quickly. Now, Excel also does columns. We've been adding rows, but if I go down to grand total and I click the sum button, you can see that I am adding E6 through E9. So I'm getting E7 and E8 at the same time. And this time I'll hit enter just to show you where I go. And see, I wind up underneath grand total. So that's okay. So the next thing I want to show you is percent of total. Now, percent of total is not something that Excel invented. Managers have been doing this for a long, long time, pretty much probably on with calculators and maybe, with pencil and paper before then. But when you're looking at something like this, what the manager would like to know is how these locations do against the grand total. In other words, which ones are doing better than others. And if you had 100 locations, it might be a little difficult to just kind of pick it out. We could kind of pick it out, but what percent of total is going to tell us is exactly what it says. It's going to tell us what percent of this grand total each of these locations is responsible for. Now, that is not a built-in function in Excel. We have to do that by taking total sales and dividing it by the grand total. So I'm going to put in an equal sign, and I'm going to click on total sales, and I'm going to divide it. And divide on my keyboard, it should be on yours too, is the key that has the question mark. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to click on grand total. And because I want to stay in here and use the fill handle, I'm going to hit the check mark. And now I'm going to use the fill handle, and I'm going to drag it down, and you can see that we have a problem on this side, okay? Because Excel says you're trying to divide by 0, and that's another thing Excel didn't invent, by the way. That's a mathematical term. You can't divide by 0. And we say, well, okay, I didn't think I was dividing by 0. Let's see what happened. So I go here, and I see that this is total sales divided by grand total, and that's fine. Then I go here, and I have total sales, but then I've got E11, and E11 is a blank cell, which is the same as 0. And here, it's even worse, E8 divided by E12, E9 divided by E12. So here's a case where we didn't want it to move, okay? We want to lock in this grand total, because here what we have is it's 1 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. 1 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. 1 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. So you see, we don't want it to go down this time. We want it to be specifically in here. So what we have to do is we have to lock that in. And we lock that in by clicking on the cell. Now, you don't have, when you're doing this yourself, you don't have to do this wrong and then go back and fix it. As you're doing it, you can fix it. And I'm going to do what's called making this absolute. So I absolutely want to use this number when I copy this formula, wherever I copy it. And the keyboard shortcut for that is the function 4 key, the F4 key. If you're on a regular keyboard, it's probably on top of your numbers. If you're on a laptop, you may have a little more trouble finding it. But if you can't find it, you can always type in these $signs. Excel doesn't care, because that's shift 4. So you can put a $sign before the E and a $sign before the 10. And this locks this in, so it's not going to go anywhere. So now I'm going to drag this down. I don't even have to delete this. All I have to do is steamroll right over it. See? And so now we say, okay, this is E6 divided by E10, E7 divided by E10, E8 divided by E10, E9 divided by E10. So you always want to make sure that your data makes sense. And I'll tell you an example of, I was using this before we had an online grade book. I used to keep my grades in Excel, and I had something up here to which was like the grand total, which was supposed to divide the student score by the possible points and give me their percentage. And when I did it, I forgot to absolute the total points. And when I copied it down, I had students that were getting 120%, 130%, And so I knew something was wrong because 100% was the highest you could possibly get. And I figured out that was because I forgot to make that cell absolute. And it was what it was doing was dividing by the number underneath, so it was dividing by the grade of the student underneath it. So instead of dividing by the total, the numbers. So you want to be careful and you want to check your data to make sure that it makes sense. So this is pretty much a lot of what people do. They do a lot of headings that they merge and center. They do a lot of sales. They do percent of total. Another thing that they can do, and you probably wouldn't do it in this order, but I will show you anyway, is to do an average. Okay, now because the average was added at the end, here's a neat trick too. If I'm in here, I can hit the format painter, okay? And then I can click here and it's going to pick up all the formatting from where I started. Okay, it's not going to pick up, and if I did it down here, it's not going to, it will pick up the average. You would have to be careful if you were doing something in here, but it's really good for formatting. You don't want to mess around with the numbers on there. But if I want to take an average, next to the sum button is a down arrow, and I can click on average. Now here's a case of where you have to watch your range, because we want January, February, and March, but it's trying to pick up total sales and percent of total also. So I'm going to just click on the January one and just select the range, just like I selected a range for the header. And then we have the correct stuff, and then I'll click that. And then here's another neat trick. You can double click the form of the fill handle here, and that will go down until it hits a blank cell or a cell that has a different formula than what was up here. And since this is also, looks a little funny, we have 4 decimal places, no decimal points and everything, we can straighten this out up here in the numbers section where we can decrease or increase the decimals. So let's just decrease the decimals until we get 2 decimals, and then we're fine. The one next to it is increases the decimal. So you can also take all the decimals off if you want. It'll round up if it needs to. So that is our calculation tab. Okay, now we're going to talk about functions a little bit. I've done some of these. There are over 300 functions in Excel. And the reason that I use the term 300, over 300, is that when I was doing research to decide on what textbook we were going to use for the class that I'm teaching. We never had a textbook, and then the powers that be decided we should have a textbook. So I got a hold of 4 different Excel textbooks, and each one of them had a different amount of functions. One said 306, one said 310. So I'm safe by saying there's over 300 because they were all over 300, but I'm not sure why they were counting differently. They should have all been the same, but they're not. So I'm not going over all 300. Obviously, I don't even know all 300. Okay. But I am going to show you a few of them. And the first one is count. All right. Now these can all be found on that down arrow here. So I'm going to click on count. What this does is counts numbers. All right. Now it went and found a range, and that was fine. And as you can see, so it's going to count the range B3 through B6. And I'm just going to hit the enter key because I want to go down to the next one. Oh, well, let me stay in here because I'll show you what's really cool. So if you had a big spreadsheet and all the cells were supposed to be filled with numbers, if there's a cell that doesn't have a number, it's not going to be put in there. So as you can see, I took the number out. So now there's only 3 cells with numbers. So I'm going to undo that, and it's going to go back and put 4 in. I actually use this. I have to download my grade book at the end of the semester, and I have to make sure that there's a grade in every single assignment for every student. And if they didn't miss one, then it has to have a 0. So what I'll do is I will do a count, and I will use the fill handle and go across. and the same number should come up everywhere. I'm not interested in what the number is. I just want to make sure that all the numbers are the same, because if I find one that's one less or two less, then I have to go up there and find out where I did put a grade in, and then I have to go back into the classroom and put the grade in. So it won't count text, it just counts numbers. Okay, so if I put, say, text, see, it went back to 3 again. So that's a good one to know. Total is something that we did before. That was the sum, but let me show you. Same thing here. You would have to be careful because total is trying to pick up the count cell, and you don't want to do that. So I would click and drag to make my own range, and then I'm going to hit enter because I really want to go down to the next one. Average, same thing as I showed you before, but again, now it's trying to pick up because it goes shopping to find the closest range of numbers that it can find, and goes up until it hits a blank cell. So I'm going to go like that. Yep, there's my average. Now the next one is minimum. So this is going to find the lowest number in a range. So like a company that might be keeping track of sales figures, and every day somebody puts them in, you know, and they have up here, they have the dates here, and every day they add the things for the dates, and this will keep track of the smallest and the largest. So we'll put in the min first. Again, check our range. I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so the minimum is 100. So if these numbers change during the week, and say this one goes, well, this one would be 125. So with 100 is the smallest anymore. And well, 125 is the smallest, but let's see if we could take 55 here. So now 55 is the smallest. Okay. Maximum will find the largest. We'll select our range. And you're all set. And some of the ways that you can keep Excel from getting the things that you don't want it to get would be to have blank rows between, because it will go up to or find a range until it hits a blank cell, and then it will stop. So these are some basic functions. They're used so much that they're right on the ribbon, right here on the home tab. But then you get into some that are a little bit more advanced. And the one I want to show you is the car payment. So say we know that the interest, we want to buy a car and it's $28,000, $28,500. It's a nice car. Okay, it's a Cadillac. All right. And we want a 5-year loan, and the interest is 2.5%. And Excel can tell us what our monthly payment is going to be. Now, in order to do that, we have to go into insert function. That's not up here. Okay. So we can go into the insert function, and it gives us an insert function tab. Now this most recently used is a misnomer, because if you've never ever been in insert function, there's going to be some stuff on this list. If PMT, which is what we're going to use, is not on your list, and it probably won't be the first time, you can just type PMT here, or say, I want to find a monthly payment, and click go, and then it will come up in this box. And then once you use it one time, it's always going to come up in most recently used. You can't even get rid of it if you wanted to. So I'm going to click on PMT. And the first thing it tells you in computer speak what it's going to do. And I would just ignore that. Okay. But it tells you underneath there what it's going to do. Calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. So you can't use this on a balloon payment. You can't use this if your interest rate is going to be changing over the period. This has got to be constant. And if you want more information on PMT, I'm not going to do that tonight, but if you click on help on this function, it will show you all different examples. It will have data that you can actually copy and paste onto an Excel spreadsheet, and then try out the steps if you want to. So what we're just going to do is click OK, and we're going to get to the argument screen. Now, the arguments are the things that are in the parentheses. So when we were doing sum, it was B6, B3 colon B6. Those were the arguments. Okay. So each argument has its own line, and underneath it's going to tell you what it is. Now, we could just type in the rate, but if you were going to play around with this and say, okay, I have this I want a car loan of 28.5, and it turns out I can't afford that. Well, what if I buy a car at the same interest rate with a lower price? So if I change price, the answer is going to automatically change also. All right. So here's the rate, and the rate is going to be the interest, but it also says here, this is the tricky part. It's the interest rate per period for the loan. For example, use 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments at 6% APR. Because when they tell you your interest rate, that's APR, which means it's the interest rate for a year. So since we're paying monthly, we're going to have to divide that by 12 because they said, quarterly would be for 4. So I'm going to click on interest, and then I'm going to just divide it by 12. So I picked up the cell address for this so that if we do want to play around with the interest, we would be able to do that. Then I'm going to go down to the next one, N per. N per is the total number of payments for the loan. Well, we're going to have 60 payments, right? 12 payments a year for 5 years. 5 times 12 is 60. So I'm just going to click on that because maybe I don't think you can get a loan for more than 60 periods, but you can get 3-year loans. So, if you would come out and say, oh, that's way more than I need, I could definitely spend more than that. You could change the months to 36 to see what would come out. Now, PV, present value, is the total amount that a series of future payments is worth now. In other words, that's the loan. So here's the price of the car would be here. That's, of course, after your down payment if you're putting one in. Notice that these 3 things are bolded and these 2 aren't. So that means that these are required, but these aren't. Let's take a fast look. So FV is the future value or cash balance you want to attain after the last payment is made. 0 is omitted. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm making 5 years payments, at the end of 5 years, I don't want to have anything left. So it should be 0. So you can just leave it out. Type is whether the payment is at the beginning of or the end of the period, which is very interesting because most payments are at the end of the period, which would be a 0, and you don't have to put it in because that's the default. Default is what Excel uses unless you change it. Now, if you've ever bought a house, it looks like when you go to close on the house, it looks like you got a free month, but you really didn't because you're paying at the end of the month. Then when you go sell the house, it looks like you really got stuck because all of a sudden it seems like you're paying a lot extra. But all you really need is these 3 numbers, okay? And then I'm going to click OK, and this is going to tell me that my car payment with these numbers would be $505.80, and it's coming out in red because it's a negative number. It's coming out of your pocket, okay? If you want it to come out in black, you could just put a minus sign in front of the PMT, and then it'll come out in black. But either way, that's what your answer is. So then you look at it and you say, oh, I can't afford $505, but I saw a car that was $20,000. So let's put in 20,000 here and see what happens to my payment. My payment goes down to $354.95. And that might be a little bit better. Well, I'll tell you, in 1993, I bought a new car, and I played with this because I found different places that were offering different car loans at different interests. And I played with the interest and the price until I knew approximately what I could afford. And then, and then when they told me what it was no surprise because I knew what the car payment was going to be. So that is just one of many of the functions that are insert function. And if you're interested in any of them, you can always click on them and click on help on this function, and it will show you everything that you would ever want to know about it. So last but not least, I'm going to talk about a sample budget here. All right. So I have set up a sample budget. It's a very, very basic budget, but you could actually use a template. If you go File, New, I'll show you that. I'm not going to actually do it, but if I went File, New, and search for online templates, if I search on budget, I would get budget templates that would help me fill in the data that I wanted. I'm just going to show you a few tricks on what we've learned before and how it could be applied. So I'm going to start by merging and centering this title. And then since this is our first quarter, I'm going to put in January for January, JAN for January, and use the fill handle to go across. Okay. Now here's another trick that you can do when you're adding columns. You can select the range first and then hit the sum button, and you will get them all at the same time. You can do that down this way also. I didn't do that because I just wanted to show you what I call how to crawl before you walk, before you run. Okay. So now we have total income. See, it's C4 through C5. We can do the same thing with total expenses. Oh, I know what, I did forget to show you the chart. I will be going back. Okay. And I will click on that. And then the net income, can't do it on net income. Okay, net income is just a subtraction. So I put in my equal sign, click on my total income, put in my minus, which is next to the 0. Click on total expenses, click the check mark, and then go across. Okay, so let's go and do charts now, because there's a lot of fun. So charting also, I'm going to show you what not to do first. When you make a chart, you always want to check your chart data, make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to select the data here. And to make a chart, you just click on insert. And here you have recommended charts, or you can select your own. You can make a column chart or a bar chart, a column chart or a pie chart. I'm sorry. Column and bar are both on there. So I'm going to say, let's make a pie chart. Okay. Now, here we have a chart, but this doesn't tell us anything because it just says 1, 2, 3, 4. That's really not very helpful. The reason is, if you notice, I just took the data without taking the labels that went with it. January, February, and March, north, south, east, and west are all labels. So I'm still on insert. So this time, if I do a pie, you see I get north, south, east, and west. Okay. And these are the numbers. These are, the values that are in here. And what you can do is, once and the chart is selected, is you can move the chart to its own sheet. So I'm going to click on move chart. Now, once you get in here, if you just hit OK, nothing happens. You're already an object in calculations. Why they did it this way, I don't know. But I've had students, they go in, they think they hit move and they click OK, and nothing happens. Because you have to say here that you want a new sheet, and here you can actually give it a name. So I'm just going to say it's my chart. I'm going to hit enter. And now it's on its own tab. And as you can see, A, B, C, D, and all the way down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, they all go away. So you have more chart and less background. All the, the cells have gone away. Now, what you can do here is you can add chart elements. One of the things that you can add is a data label. Okay, so if you really want to know what these numbers are, and you can say, okay, let's say inside N. And they're a little bit small, so you can handle them on the home page the way you did text, like I showed you. So I can click on them. I can go back to the home page. I can make them bigger. I can bold them. Okay, I could change the color if I wanted, but I'm not going to do that. So there's a number of different things that you can do here. And you have chart design and format, which you don't have when you have a chart that's not selected. So if I go there, they go away. Because here, so I can be on chart design. I could add the chart elements. I could change the chart style. You can go shopping here. You can just point to it and it'll tell you what it's going to do. I could switch the rows and columns, which wouldn't make any sense in this one. But that's one way of doing a chart. Okay. Now, the other way of another chart that you can make is, say that you just wanted total sales and percent of total. Okay. Because you wouldn't want to have total sales and percent of total in with January, February, and March, mainly because these numbers are already here and it's going to really throw off everything. So I'm going to select the location. I'm going to hold the control key down and select total sales and percent of total. So I can click and drag across and then down like that. And let's make a column chart this time. So I will click here, make a 3D column. Okay, and it's probably not the best one to do either because, you know, your percent of total is so much smaller than your total sales, but it kind of gives you an idea, you know, of what's going on. So I'm going to undo this and let's just take location and total sales. Nope, you don't want grand total. Okay. Sales and total sales. And I'm on insert. And so I'll do a 3D chart. And so that would tell somebody, you know, would you be able to see which ones are higher. And I'm not going to go into everything, but you can change the ranges here. I will move it again. Okay. And I'll just say, this is my column. And then if you wanted to add elements to it, here you can add data labels. You can do it as a call out. There's more here. Another thing that you can do that is really cool is if you wanted to just change one of the colors. First of all, if I click on one of the, this is called the data series. If I click on a data series, I am selecting all of them. You can see these little circles here. But say I only wanted this one. So once I click them all, I can click on this one. And this is the only one that is selected now. So I could go up to format and I could change the shape fill here. Maybe I would want to make it a lighter color blue to make it stand out. Okay. I could also do things like change the gradient, make it textured. This is kind of cute. I can put fish there if I want. Okay. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. Once on design, you could change the chart type. If you decided you didn't like it, it comes up with all the different kinds of charts. You can change it to that, make them all close together if you wanted. There's all kinds of things that you can do. When I first started doing this, what I did was, well, when we first started the charts, they didn't have a chart function. You had to buy an add-in, and this is for Excel, which is the previous, you know, spreadsheet program. And they were very hard to do. And then when Excel came out and they added this, it was so much easier to do. And I went ahead and on the chart design, I added all the chart elements. I added an axis title and I just called it axis title so I knew where it was. Okay, because if you go axis title, it's down here. So at that point, you could say locations. Notice it's coming out up there, but when I hit enter, it comes out down here. And of course, you could go back to the home tab and make that bigger. So that was one axis, and then that was the primary axis, and then the primary horizontal axis doesn't come out on here too well. Okay, we won't even talk about that. But this just gives you an idea of some of the power of Excel. And that is pretty much everything that I have for you tonight. So I'm going to stay out here. Janet, are there any questions from anybody?
I haven't seen any questions in the chat. Does anybody want to ask any questions?
Can I get a record of this class?
Yes, I am recording it, so it will be available on our YouTube channel, I hope within a day or so.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, and does next Saturday also we have class?
A week from today, next Thursday.
Sorry, next Thursday, yes.
Yes.
The same time?
Yes. Did you sign up for it?
No, what I have to do?
Go to our events calendar like you did before, and just click on the event you want and then put in your email address and your name.
No, the first class today I went to library and the library
Signed you up for it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can sign you up for it. What's your last name?
Das.
Okay. Yeah, I'll sign you up for it. Let me just write that down. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Yes, I have one question. What textbook would you recommend?
Oh, that's a hard one. Believe it or not, a good place to start is with the dummies books, Excel for
Okay.
Dummies,
Mm-hmm.
because like the textbooks that I was reviewing for class, they're like 300 pages long, and you really don't, there's a lot of stuff in there you're never going to use. But Excel for Dummies is a really good place to start.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I'm going, if you send me, send me an email on the tips and tricks thing that I put together. There are some places where you can take Excel classes for free.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. And some that aren't free, but I have a list on there, so that'll kind of help too.
I took Excel like long time ago, and if you don't use it, you lose it. It's just like all these tricks that with different projects, you use different. I don't use Excel, on a daily basis, but I want to get better. I don't want to forget.
Yeah, and that's exactly the right term. If you don't use it, you lose it. And not only that, it has changed over the years. It's actually gotten a lot easier to use.
Okay.
If you used a very old version, you didn't have the ribbon, you had a toolbar.
Mhm.
And the ribbon, for those of us that had to switch to the ribbon, it was really difficult at first. But then once you get used to it, it's like, oh, it's much better. Everything is right in front of you instead of you having to click something and then find it on a list, So,
Yes.
so the toolbar has been around since about 2010.
Mm.
But I go back even further than that. So I remember, how it used to be. So, but you're right. If you don't use it, you will lose it.
Well, I will be in your next class. I really enjoy
I will
your
look
class.
forward to seeing you.
Great.
We're gonna do a lot of what we're gonna do in the next class is we're gonna review this class a little bit, and then we're gonna go on and talk about a different kind of data. Kind of like in list format, like
Okay.
a book list, and stuff like that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that's all the questions tonight. So,
Yes.
okay, I will end
Okay.
the meeting then.
Great.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Bye.
Susan,
See
I
you
always
next
learn
week.
something from this. So.
Thank you. Good night.
See you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.